All right, let's go ahead and get started. So this is the Region 5 or Midwest session that the Brooke Owens Fellowship Program is doing to help all of you with your applications in case you have any questions, as well as a general overview of the program. So like I said, we're skipping over Sasha. So Vera, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. My name is Farah Denchenko. I'm a class of 2019 Brooke Owens Fellow. And when I was part of this program, I was paired up with NASA Goddard to do a project that involved outreach and astronomy education to develop a visitor center exhibit. Currently, I am working as a systems engineer at Lockheed Martin. I'm very happy to answer any questions you guys have about this fellowship.
Thanks, Vera. All right. Claire, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Claire. I was a Brookie this past year at Maiden Space. I worked on their spacecraft Argonaut, the extruder nozzle within that, assembling it for vacuum, as well as doing some calculations for them and working with some NASA standards. I am currently an undergrad at Colorado School of Mines, and I am still interning part-time with Maiden Space.
Thanks, Claire. All right, and this is me. My name is Sanjana Muranyi. I was also a fellow this past summer at Ball Aerospace. I worked on developing software to visualize satellite coverage, so I developed a tool for that. I also verified and performed analysis using their mission analysis software on the Mosaic team for pre-phase A and phase A of missions. And then I am currently a master's student at CU Boulder in aerospace engineering with a focus on autonomous systems. And I'm also still part-time at Ball Aerospace, but I forgot to put that there. All right, so we're gonna start with a general overview of the Brooke Owens program. And Brooke Owens is basically a program that pairs you up with a host company for a summer internship that is paid and provides you executive mentorship in the aerospace industry. And it was created to honor Dawn Brooke Owens, who was an aerospace pioneer. And she went to Embry-Riddle as well as the International Space University, where she met one of our founders. She was an amazing person. She came from a very small school, and she was valedictorian, but she always used to joke that, you know, she was in a small school, so it was easy, but she was amazing. Always very humble. And she worked at NASA's Johnson Space Center, X Prize Foundation, at the FAA, and the White House Office of Management and Budget, where she met another one of our founders. She passed away in 2016 due to cancer, and she's dearly missed by so many people. And this fellowship was created to honor her. And so one of the things you get out of this fellowship, in addition to the internship and mentorship, is you get to build your network. So at the Brooke Owens Summit, which is where this picture and below is, which is usually in Washington, D.C., but this past year was virtual because of COVID-19, you still get to connect with other fellows, with all the professional mentors who can attend the summit, and other speakers. And so it's a really amazing experience. And there's also a grand challenge that you get to do in small groups and solve some problems and present your findings, which is also really fun. And so, yeah, this is more about the Brooke Owens Summit. This past year, we did roommate presentations instead of the traditional spoken word. And so it was a really fun way to kind of get to know everyone on the first day. We had some cool speakers, Poppy Northcutt, the first woman in mission control, who was a computress at the time, and Peggy Whitson, who's a former NASA astronaut. And we also had a mentor round robin with some of the other professional mentors, which was really cool. Do the other presenters want to add anything about their summit experiences?
Sure. So when I was doing this summit, I was, well, this was before COVID hit, and we had everything done in person, which was really awesome. This is actually where you guys are seeing the pictures from. So the spoken word, which sounds like the current class didn't get to do is probably one of the most memorable things that was part of our experience. This is where you really were encouraged to tap into your creativity and basically write something poetry-like about you and share that with all the fellows and some of the mentors that were there. And this was inspired by Brooke because she was also really big on spoken word. You know, she was very expressive, very creative, and she really spoke her heart out. So at this spoken word event, you know, I got a chance to see some of the most intimate parts of the other fellows that were there with me. And it was really moving and inspiring. And you got a chance to see that, you know, maybe some of the other fellows around you, they just seem so darn impressive, and they are, but everyone has their own inner demons to struggle with. And you got a chance to really see that side of them and connect with them on a more personal level than you ever would, you know, if you were just meeting them in person at your own school or something. So that was really, really fun for us. And I really hope that, you know, the summit coming up next summer will be more like that, because I would want that to be experienced by everyone.
Thanks for sharing. Any other former Brookies want to share anything about the summit?
Yeah, so this year, as mentioned, was very different, but what I thought initially was going to be extraordinarily tacky, which is getting paired with a virtual roommate who's like on the other side of the country from you, ended up being a ton of fun. People came up with like dances, raps, sarcastic PowerPoints, t-shirts, art, all while very, very far apart from each other. And it ended up being a kind of hilarious night. And so that was definitely well worth it.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many different emotions. There was, you know, there was emotional and moving. There was funny because there were some memes there, and then, you know, there's some raps that I'm never gonna forget because they were very inspiring and really pumped us up. Yeah, so in case the summit is virtual next year, don't worry, it was still really amazing. They did such a good job with it, but in person is also really cool. So either way, it's a really great experience. All right, so let's move on to mentorship. So these are just a tidbit of our professional mentors that are paired with you when you become a Brookie, and you get to catch up with them at least once a month, learn a lot about their specific career path, and ask for advice for your career path. And you can broaden your network. So there are a lot of astronauts here, CEOs of companies, professors, the founders. There's so many interesting people to learn from. I personally really learned a lot from my mentor, and it was really great to be able to talk to her about, you know, school and picking a grad school. And even at the mentorship round robin, you get to talk to other mentors. So I didn't know that AJ Piplica, who is on here, he's the CEO of Hermeus. I'm not personally interested in planes, but he had so much advice for me that I would never have thought would be super helpful. And so it's a really cool experience to have so many professionals who are successful in their careers be able to talk to you about yours. And again, I'd like to ask the other Brookie alumni if they want to talk about their mentorship experience.
Sure. I absolutely love the mentor I was paired with. I was initially kind of curious because my mentor is more artsy and I would not consider myself that artsy. But she ended up teaching me a lot, as well as the company I was working at before my Brookie match internship. She was able to give me advice on like the actual project I was working on, as well as like career advice. And yeah, she was super, super cool.
Thank you for that. All right, so let's move on. So these are some of our previous host institutions. They're really cool companies. You can actually find the list on the website. And that's one of the things we'll ask you is to specify, you know, where you'd like to work, what's important to you. And I think the matching process for host institutions is just brilliant. I haven't heard any complaints personally about people's matches. I think either way you get to learn, whoever you're matched with, you get to learn so much at your experience, at your internship, and really broaden your experience in the industry. So yeah, super cool. And so the program eligibility, you have to be an undergrad student who is a woman, non-binary, or another gender minority. You have to be available for a full-time internship in the upcoming summer, and you need to be interested in the aerospace industry. However, you do not need to be an engineer. You do not need to be STEM related. You could be interested in business, policy, communication, education. You could be any field as long as your interest is in the aerospace industry as a whole. And so for your application this year, you need to submit your current resume and transcript. It can be unofficial. You'll need 2 recommendation letters, one that's focused on your professional experience, like your achievements, your skill, and just potential in general. And then the second one is more about you, your character, your creativity, and your dedication to service. And they can be written by anyone you know. They don't have to be professors. Again, you just really want to focus on someone for number one who can focus on your skills and potential when it comes to more achievements oriented settings. And the second one really needs to be someone who can speak to who you are as a person. And then you submit 3 original works. This year there's 1 multimedia submission and 2 written essays responding to the prompts that can be found on the website. And the applications are due by October 4th, which is coming up soon, but don't be stressed. There are lots of Brookies who have spent weeks or months on their application, and there are some who started the weekend before. What matters is that you really convey who you are. And again, if you all have questions, we're going to be doing questions at the very end of this slide deck, and we can return to this at the end. And so this is a kind of a timeline of what happens when you submit. So you submit your application on October 4th, and then it's reviewed by our selection committee, and semifinalists are going to be selected in October, like late October. And then you have a phone interview with either a founder or a mentor from the Brooke Owens program, and then that helps us select finalists by early November. And then you are matched with any potential host institutions who may conduct interviews at this stage. And so feedback is received both from you after these interviews and as well as from the hosts. And then the final matches are made based on that feedback. And then the selected finalists who become fellows are notified in December. And so these are some frequent questions. If you are a graduating senior in undergrad, you can still apply. I was personally in that situation because I was going to grad school, so I was still available for a summer, and I was an undergrad at the time. You do not need to be a U.S. citizen or permanent resident for some of the host institutions. Our last class this year had 2 international students, and but it does help in terms of the other companies that have that ITAR restriction. And usually there are about 40 fellows each year, and the internships are going to vary because of COVID-19. This year we had a mixture of remote internships, some were in person and some were hybrid, which means they were a little bit remote, a little bit in person. So it really depends on the host institution and what they're doing. But again, like no matter what happens, this fellowship does a really great job of making sure you have an internship for your Brooke Owens summer. And so it isn't a concern in terms of, am I going to have an internship? It's more of a, okay, I have an internship and what's the environment going to look like? Which we all, they do a really great job of helping figure that out for you. All right, so some general application tips. Start early, especially for recommendation letters. It's just a lot less stressful if you start early, and you can maybe get some more feedback from people around you, which is this point over here. It can be helpful to get another pair of eyes to look at your essays, for example, or your multimedia and see if you really are conveying who you are. Be personal and show creativity. So this is a very unique fellowship application in that it's not just technical. In fact, we really want to be able to get to know you as a person and see you be creative and be different and show your own unique self, which is really cool. I think it's so much more humane and holistic of a process than other general fellowship applications. All right, and so these are some personal tips, and we're going to go around to the different alumni as well. But I'm going to start with, don't afraid to be unconventional when it comes to your multimedia submissions, when it comes to your essays. For example, we've had a range of multimedia submissions. Some people created, TikTok. Some people did like a YouTube vlog, or, some people do spoken word or dance or make art, make an actual piece, submit, comics. There's so much you can do. I know one person who submitted origami for an application. And so really don't be afraid to be unique. You don't have to fit one cookie cutter mold. There is no one answer to the multimedia submission. It's more about showcasing who you are and your skill and creativity. And then it can help to get multiple perspectives on your application, but don't let that change what you want to say. Because even if people have feedback and maybe they think it's too flowery or, it's not technical enough, remember that this fellowship really cares about who you are. And you don't want to change that. And yeah, so tell us about your passions and don't be afraid to show your excitement. Sometimes people can think, in an interview, maybe I should calm myself down, even though I'm just really, really excited. But the excitement is contagious. So remember that, especially for your Brooke Owens semifinalist interview, that is something that will help set you apart from everyone else, that excitement. All right, so the other Brookie alumni, do you have anything to add to this? Any personal tips?
Yeah, so guys, if any of you struggle with imposter syndrome, please, please, please throw it out the door when you're going through this application process and the interview process. That thing can easily break your chances of, showcasing the founders and the others who are going to be judging your application, who you are, how creative you are, how passionate you are. Don't let the imposter syndrome get in the way. And if it is getting in the way, there are plenty of resources to help with that. And I'm sure that the people here out of the alums will be able to also give you some helpful resources.
I guess something for me that I wish I'd known when I applied was while you do submit your transcripts, GPA/transcripts don't do too much. Personally, my transcripts are a mess. My GPA is average, but as long as you have other things to showcase what you've done and what you're passionate about, you'll be just fine. So that was something that kind of impeded me from applying previous years, which I finally was told to essentially get over myself by a past fellow. And so I finally applied. So
Both of you just gave great advice. Yeah, there are people who've applied with 4.0s on the website and they were not given the fellowship. And that's not because that's not good enough, it's because that's not the requirement to become a Brookie. It's a more holistic process for sure. You could be, classes don't paint a picture of who you are. And like, it was mentioned, imposter syndrome. There's so many Brookies who almost did not click apply or submit. They were super close to not submitting, and then they ended up getting the fellowship. But another thing I want to add is I personally applied last year and I didn't even make semifinalist, but I reapplied. It's something that that definitely hurt, hit the imposter syndrome. Maybe I'm not good enough, but don't be afraid to apply again. And that can really help because then you get familiar with the process. Multiple takes sometimes do the job. So that was just one more thing I wanted to add.
And to comment off of that, actually, I was in the same boat as her. I also had to reapply. I did not make it to semifinalist the first time around. But you know what? I believed that I had something to show for this fellowship. I believed I belonged to it, and I wanted to reapply. And I ended up getting it the second time. So definitely don't be afraid to reapply if you didn't make it the first time around.
And I guess one last thing I wanted to say about something I may have done differently I am a procrastinator to the worst level, and I would not have started the video editing process for my multimedia essay the night it was due because that was unnecessary stress. So if you're going to procrastinate, maybe not till the night of, maybe a few days before.
For sure. Starting early is definitely always a great move. Awesome. Thank you so much for your insight. We're going to move on. And so Kayla Watson is a member of our executive board and is also a 2018 fellow. And she said, I've never felt so many people personally invested in my success. The mentorship provided by the fellowship program is phenomenal. And, I really can attest to that. And I'm sure, Vera, Claire, that you can also attest to that. It really feels as though this whole network, everyone is really lifting each other so that we can all climb to success. And it's a very supportive network. It's really, there's no competition. It's more as though we're collaborating together, which I think is a wonderful thing to be a part of. And so this is just something that we all would like to echo. And yeah, so stay in touch with us. You can follow us on social media. You can also, if you have any questions about your application or the process, go to Ask a Brookie. There's also a fellowship Slack. And so if you go to the website, there is a Google form you can fill out to join the applicant Slack. Also, if you want to reach out, you can contact me directly at this email. I'm happy to help answer any general questions. And yeah, so now I'm going to open it up to questions from our audience. Do you have any questions about, the process, anything we mentioned? And the way we're going to do this is if you could just raise your hand in the, the raise hand feature, that could be, that's how we'll do the order. Just wanted to ask if everyone has that ability to raise their hand. Awesome. All right, Marie, feel free to ask your question.
I guess so, I'm thinking about getting started on my application, but I'm not sure, so with this, I am really interested in the aerospace industry, but sometimes I just looking at everyone else's different things. I feel like maybe I'm not as passionate as everyone else. So I don't know, I'm really interested, but I feel like I'm interested in a lot of different things and I just don't know, so I don't know if I should apply. I am really interested, but I don't I feel like a lot of people knew they wanted to be in the aerospace industry for a long time, or in aerospace in some way.
Claire, Vera, do one of you want to answer that? If not, I can take a shot as well.
Sure. So to comment off of something you said, not everyone that we've had in the fellowship has went on to become part of the aerospace industry. People have changed their minds, and you know what? We still support them. It's okay to have many interests and not really be sure what exactly it is that you want to do. But I think this fellowship can help you get a better idea. Worst case scenario, you try this out, you don't like it, and that's the end of that. That's okay. You will still have access to the mentorships programs that we have through the fellowship, who can help, give you some more career advice specific to something you've narrowed down down the line. But I don't think your passion about many things should stop you from applying.
I agree with that. I did major in aerospace engineering in undergrad and now, but one of the things that I'm still debating is whether or not I want to have that as a position. I also have multiple interests, mechanical, electrical, software. And I think that the beauty of this, was mentioned, is just that this doesn't have to be the end goal. Even in your career, your first job doesn't have to be your forever job. People change their minds all the time, and we understand that, and you know, we encourage it because you should be happy with what position you have at the end of the day, right? Also, in terms of aerospace and loving aerospace, even I feel like sometimes that a lot of other aerospace engineers, they live and breathe this stuff. But I like other things. I have interests outside of aerospace. It is not my life, it is a part of my life. And you know, that's okay. Um, that should not in any way stop you from applying. In fact, we encourage you to apply and maybe even talk about having multiple interests.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. All right, so Jasmine, you're next. Would you like to ask your question?
Hi, yeah. So I was wondering what you guys think about having a recommender that I used last year for a recommendation letter. I didn't get past like the semifinalist round, or I didn't get past the first round. And I asked a Brookie about this already, and she said it would be fine, but I just wanted to get your input also and see what you think about that.
I have literally used the same people the first time around for my letters of recommendation, the second time that I applied. So this is totally fine. Trust me.
Okay, awesome.
Yep, same here.
Okay, good to know. Thank you so much.
Yeah, work smart, not hard.
All right, so Anna, I saw your hand next. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes, hi. I'm just wondering, so for those who applied multiple times, what did you do differently the second time around that you think might have contributed to your selection into the program?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with that. My first time applying, I was definitely too technical. I focused way too much on my research and my experience that way, and I didn't spend enough time showing who I am in my application. I definitely was of the impression that I couldn't be as flowery and creative and stuff as I wanted to be, because at the end of the day, this was still going to pair me up with a technical internship in my case. But I was wrong. And so I definitely took more time to just convey who I was. And that definitely helped. Any other Brookies want to add?
Yeah, so I think in my case, I had the opposite problem. Well, the first time I applied, so just a little bit of background information. I'm not an engineer. I have an astrophysics degree. So the first time I applied, I actually didn't even have any research experience yet. And that actually is the thing that set me apart from moving on to the next round, because I did take the time to showcase who I was and how passionate I was about space, but I didn't have enough technical experience to where, you know, they felt confident in selecting me. So the advice I got after I didn't make it past the semifinalist round was get some research experience and then reapply. And they really do want you to reapply, because if they notice you and they're really impressed with your character, or in the other case, you know, your technical experience, so long as you can showcase how passionate you are about space and how dedicated you are, I think it's a really good idea to just reapply and really take in the feedback that they give you.
And to add to that, one of the things that I did is I emailed the founders asking for why I didn't make it. And it took Will months to get back to me, but when he did, he gave me an essay of a response as to what went on with my application, what was the selection committee's thought process when they decided not to let me move to the next round. And so that feedback, you know, that they give in the general email, if that's not enough, don't be afraid to reach out and ask for why you didn't make it. That can definitely help, because then they'll cater their feedback to you. Any other thoughts from any other Berkey alumni? Okay.
Yeah, just to, I guess, add on to that, the founders are super, super nice, and so are the past fellows, you know, they will absolutely take the time of their day to write you tailored feedback to your situation. So definitely don't be afraid to ask. We really don't bite.
Yeah, like I said, you can email me, you can go to Ask a Brookie, you can DM us on Instagram. That has happened before. Connect with us on LinkedIn. We are very open to helping. And so I saw there was a question in the chat. So Madison, you asked how many Brookies get picked from CU every year. However, it's good to note that there isn't a quota from a university. It's really, that isn't how the selection committee goes through the process. It's just, you know, if people stand out, they move on and might become fellows. So like Vera said, that year they had 5 Brookies. I'm not sure in the 2020 class how many were from CU.
There was one.
Okay, yeah, so
Two from Colorado.
yeah. So like, as you can see, it varies, you know, year to year. There is no set number that they accept.
I think the reason why we had so many Brookies picked in 2019 class is because the amount of advertising that gets done in the engineering school and, you know, in my astronomy department, I really tried to make sure that people knew more about this fellowship because, you know, the engineering school has typically no problem advertising this fellowship, but in other departments like geology, or, you know, if you're a journalist major, that's not a very well-known fellowship. So I think it also depends on how many people at your school get involved in communicating about this fellowship.
Yeah, recruitment efforts, we're trying to be more accessible. We're trying to diversify the fields as well as the schools that we reach out to in terms of spreading the word of this fellowship. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. All right, so I see that Marie, you still have your hand up. Do you have another question?
Yeah, I was kind of wondering, with, I guess, well, 2 things. So I know you mentioned kind of, emailing and asking for feedback. I know with so I applied last year and they said that basically they had so many people that they weren't able, or we wish we could provide personalized feedback, but they're too overwhelmed to do so. And so they gave the general observations. I was wondering, do you think it's still possible I could ask for feedback on my application from last year? And then my second question is just based on, I guess, the first application you guys submitted, did you change everything from your application? Because for example, I wrote a poem, I think, for my first submission, or last year, and I still really like the poem and I still feel like it really is representative. So should I kind of try and make all new materials is my question. Yeah, so those are my 2 questions.
So regarding your first question, what's just a little observation. It's really cool how many more applications we get every year. I mean, last year was, again, record breaking. We've received the most amount of applications in the history of this fellowship. So every year the number increases. And I think it's a good comment that you made, because perhaps we need to bring this up to our fellowship and make sure that we have a more dedicated team as far as getting personalized feedback to the people who have applied and didn't make it past the semifinalist round, because you guys deserve that, right? So we can definitely discuss this between ourselves. But Sanjana, would you like to add as to where the feedback could be received still? I believe it can.
So that's a very good question. And Marie, if you want to follow up and send me an email, I can try and get back to our leadership team and see if we can do that for you. This is probably the best time to do it since we haven't actually started reviewing applications before the deadline. That point becomes very busy, and so then it's really hard to get any feedback. So I think as soon as you email or just let us know, I can ask the leadership team and see what we can do for you there, because that really depends on the founders and the leadership, the exec team, because they provide that feedback. And then as for your second question, which is, did you redo everything, or did we redo everything? So I definitely kept elements of my application. I still did a video for my multimedia, which is what I did before. I also started very late in the process. I think it's definitely great to keep what you, if, for example, your poem, if you think it's really representative, you for sure keep it. But maybe try to add something different to it, just to like, I don't know. I honestly don't think it matters if you submit the same thing, but if you want to maybe add something in terms of how you present it. So maybe if you submitted it as like a sheet of paper, maybe you could, you know, record yourself speaking the poem. Maybe that would give us a more of a touch into who you are. But these are things that I'm just suggesting with no background. You should do what you feel is right in terms of your multimedia, and there's no restriction in terms of reusing your old application material. Does anyone
Okay,
else want to
thank
add to
you.
that?
Yeah, so when I applied the second time, I stuck to the same kind of two multimedia pieces that I've done the first time around. So I did a painting the first time, I did a painting the second time, but I basically made a new thing. And I also wrote a poem actually. So I completely scrapped that the second time around, just to start over with fresh pair of eyes. But I think for the piece where I actually had to, write about in response to a prompt, that was completely different, because the person I was the first time I applied versus who I was the second time I applied, there was a change. I did feel more confident about who I was and my abilities, and I felt like I definitely had a big purpose there. So my prompt response definitely changed and it sounded more confident. So if you want to reuse stuff from last year, absolutely go ahead. But I encourage you to look at it with a fresh pair of eyes to see, and just reflect about how far you've come a year since, because people do change. And, maybe you have some more awesome things to talk about now.
Yeah, showcasing growth for sure. It can be very much in your favor. So I guess, yeah, I think that's a much better answer than mine, but she's, a fresh pair of eyes and maybe trying to find a way to include and incorporate your growth from last year would be a great way to, I guess, approach it.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Awesome. And so Jasmine, did you have another question?
Yeah, I do. So I know one of the feedback points they gave last year to applicants who didn't make it through the first round was to get more hands-on experience relating to aerospace. And I know they said that could include being in clubs and research and internships, but that was one thing that I was a little worried about because I still haven't had a real summer internship yet. And I don't know if that's like going to make it harder for me to move on. I just kind of wanted a sense of that. I do participate in research on campus, so I just didn't know if that, weighs in as much as an internship.
Absolutely. That's technical experience that's going to help you on your application. May I ask if you were participating in on-campus research the previous year?
Yeah, but I had like just started it a month before I applied for the fellowship.
Gotcha. So in that case, yeah, this totally works in your favor because, you've had a lot more time to dedicate yourself to your research project, so you can talk way more about it and probably are going to sound more confident about it too. So
Okay.
I think the fact that you don't have a summer internship yet is not going to break your chances here because you do have on-campus research position.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
And to add to that, we've had rookies who've not had summer internships in the past, or they've had summer internships not related to aerospace. So it's really, as mentioned, like there are some rookies who really got invested in their clubs and got so much hands-on experience there that they were able to talk about it. Research, for example, I personally did not have. I really care about space, and I've never been able to get a space internship in the past because I was not a citizen or I wasn't competitive enough to get into one of those commercial companies that allow just green card holders. And so I really went all out in my research the next year after I applied the first time and didn't make it, just so I had, more to talk about. And so, yeah, just like, was mentioned before, it's all about your confidence, and the fact that you've spent more time means you have more experience, technical experience. So you're totally
Okay. Thank you. I also have one more question. In terms of service, I know that's one of the things that they ask for in terms of our recommendation letters and our one of our essays. So what did that look like for you guys when you were applying? Like, what did you talk about in terms of your community service?
So I'll start with my experience. As mentioned before, I was studying astrophysics when I was applying for this, and for the past 4 years, basically, because I was a senior when I applied a second time, I was involved in a astronomy outreach club where we were going to underrepresented parts of Colorado. We were bringing, inflatable planetarium dome to them, where I was writing my own shows and could give talks about space stuff. This is for kids who probably will never get this opportunity to visit, planetarium locally. Their school doesn't have the money for it. So this was just like one example of service that I guess you could use if you're in a similar boat. Are you involved in a club that is directly related to, your unique background, what you're studying, what your interests are. For example, if you are a journalist, just to throw it out there, are you involved in a club, or maybe you're doing your own kind of project where you're, for example, writing about space events in your own words, and then maybe sending it off to a big publication newspaper. That's just a really rough example, but this is going to be unique to your own circumstance. So I'm sure if you are an engineer, it's going to look way different than for someone who comes from a non-STEM background.
And to add to that, for example, I am an engineer, and my outreach in my service has been mostly like, for example, my undergrad was in Georgia Tech, so one of the things I did, because our classes were hard, and I feel like it was so tough to get a consistent education depending on who the professor was. I really worked with some clubs at Georgia Tech to help start undergraduate teaching assistant program in our school. That's just one example, because I really love teaching, and I think it can make a huge difference if you have good TAs in a class. On the other hand, there are people who, for example, I'm a part of the Women of Aeronautics and Astronautics, or WOA, and so I just plan small events in our school for undergrads. For example, if there were incoming freshmen, a lot of freshmen in aerospace don't really get to meet each other because they aren't taking their core aerospace classes yet. And so I just helped run a little aerospace organization fair, like a student org fair. And it was as simple as just starting a Slack and getting people to show up with pizza. And, but that event made a difference. It's all about how you talk about what you've done and the impact it had. It's kind of like on your resume, why is the experience you've listed there important? The so what for what you've done.
For me, this is finally something I can talk about. For me, I'm also an engineering major. My outreach, volunteerism sort of thing had nothing to do with engineering. I like adaptive technology, and I also like 3D printing and maker spaces. And so I started this thing at my school called a chapter of Magic Wheelchair. So we literally make costumes to put over kids' wheelchairs. And I'd done that for a couple of years in a row, and it was a blast for me. And I guess it also showed my multiple interests, because I'm interested as well in sort of neurodiversity in STEM and aerospace, and disability outreach. So that was what I did, which is completely different. So you have a whole broad range of things you can do, and as long as it makes an impact, it can be small.
Thank you. That's awesome. Thanks so much.
Awesome. So we're going to move on to Anna. I think you have another question, and then we're going to go to Robin.
Yeah, so I was just wondering if the 5-minute, so for Multimedias, it says that the submission needs to be reviewed within a 5-minute window. That's specifically just for reviewing the multimedia, correct? Like not for all the essays or the entire application itself.
Yeah, that's just for the multimedia. For example, if you have a video, it should be 5 minutes, not more than that. And you know, the essays have a word limit, and that's really all that matters in terms of that. So yes, that is the short answer to your question is yes.
Thank you.
All right, Robin, you're next.
Okay, so one of my recommenders is a director of my student lab, and he asks students who ask him for a rec letter to write their own. Do you have any tips for that? Because I want to, I guess I'm worried I'm going to overshoot, but I also am worried that I'm going to undershoot. Do you have like tips of how to balance that?
I do, because two of my recommenders made me write my own recommendations. What I ended up doing is was afraid also to overshoot and like, look at all the things I've done. And so what I did is I put things that are factual in there, things that could be easily backed up. And I also, Google has some amazing resources for writing letters of rec. And what I ended up doing is I left about like 3 sentences of a paragraph up for them to write themselves, because I don't know what their opinion of me is. And so that's sort of how I balanced less objective opinions with things that are, I guess, validatable. And I don't know if anyone else has experience with that.
Although I personally don't, I had a friend who was in the same boat. You know, his people were writing him letters of recommendation, asked him to write his own. And what he has told me is that he basically just had to step away from, you know, this mindset where, you know, he's worried about himself, whether he's overshooting or undershooting his abilities and skills and experiences. You just have to clear your mind, so to speak. You know, maybe wait a day before you start writing this, and think about yourself almost in like a third person kind of way. You know, if you, or maybe if you were, it would help if you're thinking about yourself as like you were your own best friend. You know, you're proud of your best friend. How would you speak highly of your best friend without lying about any of their experiences, right? So definitely, to echo Claire's thoughts, make sure you do put down factual things that can be backed up easily, but also don't be afraid to speak about your qualities, because that's going to be super important in these letters of recommendation. You know, we want to see, you know, what kind of character you have, what sets you apart from everyone else. So maybe that will help as well when you're writing the letters.
Thank you.
So Robin, that was your question. Do we have any more questions? We have 7 minutes left in the hour. Again, if you think of questions later, that's totally fine. You can always use our resources like Ask a Brookie, the applicant Slack, contact one of us directly, and we'd be happy to help and follow up with you later. Oh, Robin, do you have another question?
Yeah, so this is completely different from the last one, but for my multimedia project, maybe I just read over this part of the website, but are you allowed to include a description of like the important parts of your multimedia so that they understand the thought process behind it?
If you have a piece of artwork or something like that, as long as it can be reviewed in 5 minutes with a little synopsis, you should be fine.
Okay, thank you.
And I also just posted in our comments my personal email address. Please reach out to me if you come up with any other questions. You know, after this Zoom meeting is over, I'm gonna definitely be good about, you know, sending you guys an email back within the same day. Just might be a little few hours delayed, but other than that, I am an open book.
Mine's down there too.
Thank you all so much for doing this today. It honestly made me feel a lot more better about the application and everything, so I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Are there any other last minute questions? If not, we can go ahead and end a little early.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Before we end it, does everyone have our email addresses? Because I think the once we close out of this meeting, you're not going to get access to this anymore.
Good point. I can wait for a few minutes.
And Robin, do you have another question?
No, sorry.
No worries.
All right. Does everyone have Vera and Claire's email address?
Hmm. Thanks again, you guys, for hosting this. It was very helpful.
Of course. Thank you all for attending.
Yeah, thanks, guys. And yeah, we wish you guys luck in the application process. We know you're going to rock it.
Yes, we're super excited to see you all apply and reapply, and you know, it'll be such a great experience. So thank you all for coming and for applying and knowing about Brooke Owens and the fellowship and giving it a shot. All right. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to stop recording, and this will be up on our website if you ever want to refer to it again. Again, just feel free to reach out if you have any other questions, and follow us on social media. Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone.